They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But nobody tells you that it takes 10 years to freeze. My name is Megan Matthews. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in Florida, Miami, where the rain never stops and apparently, neither does betrayal. This is the story of how the worst day of my life became the foundation for the best revenge I never knew I was building. But before I tell you what happened when Mason Webb walked into my office 10 years after leaving me at the altar, I need to know something. Where are you watching this from? Are you in a city where ambition eats people alive? A small town where everyone knows your shame? Or maybe you're somewhere in between, just trying to figure out if you have what it takes to turn your pain into power. Drop a comment because I want to know if you're watching from the place where your story begins or the place where you're trying to leave behind. Because geography matters when you're trying to outrun humiliation. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. I was 25 years old, standing in the bridal suite of the Sentinel Hotel in downtown Portland. The dress cost $4,000. My mother had cried when she saw me in it at the fitting. It was ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, fitted perfectly to a body I'd starved for 6 months to achieve. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. My makeup was airbrush perfect. I looked like every bride in every magazine I'd obsessed over since I was a little girl playing wedding with my stuffed animals. The ceremony was supposed to start at 4 o'clock. It was now 4:30. My maid of honor, Jennifer, kept checking her phone with increasingly frantic energy. My mother stood by the window, her face tight with something between fury and pity. And I sat on a velvet ottoman, my hands folded in my lap, still believing that Marcus was just running late. That there was traffic. That his phone had died. That any second now, someone would burst through the door with a perfectly reasonable explanation. At 4:45, Mason's best man, Derek, finally came in. His face told me everything before his mouth could form the words. Mason wasn't coming. The specifics didn't matter then, and they barely matter now, except for how they shaped what came after. He'd left a note with Derek. Not even the courage to face me himself. The note said he couldn't do it. That he wasn't ready. That he loved me, but not enough. That he was sorry. Sorry. As if sorry could unsend 200 wedding invitations. As if sorry could refund the $30,000 my parents had scraped together. As if sorry could erase the image of me standing at the altar alone, a bride without a groom, a woman without a future. I didn't cry. Not then. I stood up, smoothed down my $4,000 dress, and walked out of that bridal suite with my head high. I walked past the guests who'd gathered in the hallway, their faces twisted with shock and pity. I walked past my weeping mother and stone-faced father. I walked out of the Sentinel Hotel and into the rain because of course it was raining, this was Portland, and misery loves atmospheric consistency. Jennifer ran after me with an umbrella, but I waved her off. I wanted to feel the rain. I wanted it to wash away the makeup, the hairspray, the illusion that I'd had my life figured out. I walked 12 blocks in that wedding dress, the train dragging through puddles, the silk growing heavy with water. People stared. Some took pictures. I didn't care. I walked until I reached my apartment, the one I'd been planning to give up because Marcus and I were supposed to move into a house together. Our house. Our future. I walked up 3 flights of stairs, leaving wet footprints on the carpet. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and finally, I let myself fall apart. I cried for 3 days straight. I didn't eat. I didn't answer my phone. I just lay in that ruined wedding dress on my bedroom floor and let myself break completely. Because sometimes you have to shatter before you can rebuild yourself into something stronger. On the 4th day, I got up. I took off the dress, stuffed it in a garbage bag, and threw it down the trash chute. I took a shower that lasted an hour. I made myself eat scrambled eggs even though they tasted like dust. And then I sat down at my laptop and started planning the rest of my life. Here's what I knew. I was 25 years old with a bachelor's degree in business administration from Portland State University. I'd been working as a junior marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm, making $38,000 a year. I'd been competent but not exceptional, coasting along because I'd been more focused on planning a wedding than building a career. Mason had been the ambitious one, or so I'd thought. He'd worked in commercial real estate development, always talking about the deals he was closing, the buildings he was going to develop, the empire he was going to build. I'd been content to be his supporting character, the wife who threw dinner parties and looked good at client events. But Mason wasn't building an empire anymore. He was gone. And I was done being anyone's supporting character. I gave myself permission to be angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that burns out quickly. The cold, calculated kind that fuels you for years. I was angry at Mason for being a coward. Angry at myself for making him the center of my universe. Angry at a world that taught women to dream about weddings instead of empires. So I decided to build my own empire. The first year after the wedding that never was, I became a different person. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I arrived at the office before anyone else and left after everyone had gone home. I volunteered for every project, every pitch, every impossible deadline. I studied marketing strategies, consumer psychology, digital analytics. I read every book, took every online course, absorbed information like I was trying to fill the void Mason had left. My boss, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Knowles, noticed. 6 months after my non-wedding, she called me into her office. "Megan," she said, leaning back in her leather chair, "you're working like someone with something to prove. That's either going to burn you out or make you dangerous. Which is it going to be?" "Dangerous," I said without hesitation. She smiled. "Good. I'm promoting you to senior coordinator. 20% raise. But I'm also giving you the Henderson account, which has been bleeding money for 2 years. Fix it, and you'll have proven you deserve more than just a title bump." The Henderson account was for a regional chain of home improvement stores that couldn't compete with the big box retailers. Their marketing was stale, their brand identity was confused, and their customer base was aging out. Everyone at the firm had taken a crack at it and failed. I spent 3 weeks doing nothing but research. I visited every Henderson location within 100 miles. I talked to customers, employees, managers. I analyzed their competitors, their pricing strategies, their market positioning. And then I saw it, the angle everyone else had missed. Henderson wasn't trying to compete with the giants on price or selection. They needed to compete on expertise and community. I repositioned them as the store where real people got real help with their real projects. I created a campaign called Know How, featuring employees as the heroes, not the products. I developed workshops, loyalty programs, and partnerships with local contractors. In 6 months, Henderson's revenue increased by 32%. Patricia promoted me to account director. I was 26 years old and suddenly making $75,000 a year. But I wasn't satisfied. Not even close. I started thinking bigger. The advertising firm was teaching me the skills, but I was building someone else's empire, not my own. I began to plan my exit strategy. For 2 years, I saved aggressively. I lived in the same modest apartment, drove the same beat-up Honda Civic, ate pasta and canned vegetables. Every dollar that didn't go to rent or utilities went into savings. I also started freelancing on the side, taking on small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. I learned how to hustle, how to close deals, how to deliver results with minimal resources. By the time I was 28, I had $80,000 saved and a portfolio of successful campaigns. I'd also built relationships with 3 other talented people from various firms around Florida, all of them as hungry and ambitious as I was. We met in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday evening. There was Simone Cole, a brilliant graphic designer who could make anything look expensive. David Park, a data analyst who could predict consumer behavior with unsettling accuracy. And Christina Hayes, a copywriter whose words could sell ice to Eskimos, as the old saying goes. "I want to start my own firm," I told them. "A boutique agency that works with mid-sized companies that are too big for freelancers but too small to interest the major agencies. We focus on authentic storytelling and measurable results. We stay lean, and we stay hungry." "What's the catch?" David asked.
"No catch.
"Equal partnership. We split everything 4 ways. But we work harder than we've ever worked in our lives, and we don't stop until we're either successful or dead. They were in. We called the company Ascent Marketing Group. The name was intentional. We were climbing, always climbing, and we were taking our clients with us. Starting a business is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down. Everything is terrifying and exhilarating, and you're never quite sure if you're about to soar or crash into the ground. The first 6 months were brutal. We worked out of Simone's apartment because we couldn't afford office space. We ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. We cold-called businesses until our voices were hoarse. We created pitch decks and proposals and sent them into the void, hoping anyone, would give us a chance. Our first real client was a local brewery that wanted to expand distribution. They had $10,000 to spend. It wasn't much, but it was everything to us. We created a campaign that positioned them as the beer for Florida's creative class, young professionals who valued authenticity over mass market appeal. We shot guerrilla-style videos featuring local artists and musicians. We leveraged social media before most companies understood its power. The campaign worked. The brewery's sales doubled in 4 months. They sent us referrals. Those referrals sent more referrals. Slowly, painfully, we started to build momentum. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were months where we couldn't make payroll for ourselves. There were nights where I lay awake calculating how close we were to bankruptcy. There were clients who didn't pay, campaigns that failed, partnerships that fell apart. But we kept climbing. By the time I was 30, Ascent Marketing Group had a small office in the Pearl District, 12 employees, and annual revenue of $2 million. We'd gone from scraping by to thriving. But I still wasn't satisfied. I studied business strategy obsessively. I attended conferences, networked relentlessly, learned from everyone who'd built something bigger than what we had. I realized that to grow beyond boutique status, we needed to specialize and scale. We needed to become the experts in something specific. I chose B2B technology marketing. Florida was becoming a tech hub, with startups and mid-sized companies that needed sophisticated marketing but couldn't afford the San Francisco agencies. It was a blue ocean, relatively uncontested, waiting for someone smart enough to dominate it. We pivoted. We hired specialists in tech marketing. We learned the language of SaaS, cloud computing, enterprise solutions. We created case studies, white papers, thought leadership content. We positioned ourselves as the agency that understood technology companies because we thought like technology companies. It worked. By 32, Ascent Marketing Group had 40 employees and revenue of $12 million. By 34, we'd hit $25 million with offices in Florida, Seattle, and San Francisco. We'd won industry awards. I'd been featured in Florida Business Journal as one of the city's top entrepreneurs under 40. I'd built something real, something substantial, something that was entirely mine. And I'd barely thought about Mason Webb in years. Until the day his resume crossed my desk. It was a Tuesday morning in late September. I was in my office on the top floor of our Florida headquarters, reviewing candidates for a senior account executive position. We were expanding our Seattle office and needed someone with experience in commercial real estate technology, a niche area where construction and property management companies were finally investing in digital transformation. My assistant, James, had pre-screened the applications and flagged 3 finalists. I was on the second resume when I saw the name. Mason Andrew Webb. For a moment, I just stared at the letters, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Then my heart started pounding, not with the old pain, but with something else entirely. Something that felt like electricity running through my veins. I read his resume carefully, professionally, as if he were any other candidate. 45 years old. Bachelor's degree from University of Oregon. 15 years of experience in commercial real estate development. His career trajectory was there in black and white, and it told a story. After leaving me at the altar, Mason had continued working at the development firm for 3 years before being laid off during the 2008 financial crisis. He'd bounced around to smaller firms, each position lasting a year or 2. He tried to start his own development company in 2012. It had failed within 18 months. He'd been working at mid-level positions ever since, never quite regaining his footing. His most recent position had been at a small property management firm. He'd been there for 11 months. He was applying for a senior account executive role that paid $90,000 a year, decent money, but nowhere near the executive level he'd once aspired to. And he was applying to work at the company I'd built from nothing while he'd been busy throwing away his own potential along with our future. The universe has a sense of humor, it's just not usually this obvious about it. I sat back in my chair and let myself feel everything. The old wound that I'd thought had healed completely suddenly throbbed. But more than that, I felt powerful. For 10 years, I'd been building something while Mason had been failing. For 10 years, I'd been becoming someone while Mason had been losing himself. And now he wanted to work for me. I picked up my phone and called James. The third candidate, Mason Webb. I want him brought in for an interview. Really? James sounded surprised. His resume is solid, but it's the weakest of the three. Multiple short-term positions, that failed startup venture, he's been kind of all over the place. I know, I said. Bring him in anyway. I'll interview him personally. There was a pause. James had worked for me for 3 years. He knew me well enough to sense when I had an agenda. Okay, boss. I'll set it up. One more thing, I added. Don't tell him who'll be conducting the interview. Just give him the standard information about the company and the position. Got it. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the Florida skyline. The rain was falling as always, streaking down the windows in patterns that looked almost purposeful. I thought about that girl in the wedding dress, walking through the rain with her life in pieces. I thought about every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt I'd pushed through to get here. And I smiled. The interview was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. I spent the intervening days in a strange state of anticipation. Part of me wanted to cancel it, to avoid reopening old wounds. But a stronger part of me wanted to face him, to show him exactly what he'd walked away from. I chose my outfit carefully that morning. A charcoal gray suit from Theory, perfectly tailored. A silk blouse in deep burgundy. Heels that added 3 inches to my 5'6" frame. Hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Minimal jewelry, just my watch, a Cartier tank that I'd bought myself when we hit 20 million in revenue, and small diamond studs. I looked powerful, polished, and completely in control. Because I was. At 1:30, James called my office. Mason Webb is here. He's early. Let him wait, I said. Show him to the small conference room at 2 exactly. I spent the next 30 minutes finishing actual work, refusing to let Mason Webb disrupt my schedule. At precisely 2 o'clock, I picked up the leather portfolio that held his resume and walked toward the conference room. My heels clicked on the polished concrete floors. Employees looked up as I passed, some greeting me, others just nodding with respect. I'd built this. All of it. I paused outside the conference room door, taking one last deep breath. Then I opened it and walked inside. Mason was sitting at the table, facing away from the door, looking at his phone. He was wearing a suit that had seen better days, the shoulders slightly rumpled, the color faded from too many dry cleanings. His hair was thinner than I remembered, with gray at the temples. He'd put on weight, not a lot, but enough to blur the sharp edges he'd had at 30. He looked up as I entered, and our eyes met. I watched the recognition hit him in stages. First confusion, then shock, then something that might have been horror. His face went pale. He half stood, then seemed to forget how legs worked, and sat back down heavily. Hello, Mason, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I walked to the opposite side of the table and sat down, placing the portfolio in front of me. Thank you for coming in today. Megan, he managed. His voice was hoarse. I didn't know you worked here. I don't work here, I said pleasantly. I own it. I'm the founder and CEO of Ascent Marketing Group. Didn't you research the company before applying? The color was coming back to his face now, turning it red instead of pale. Yes, I researched the company. I didn't connect. I mean your name, I didn't see. Matthews. I finished for him. I kept my maiden name. Why would I have taken the name of someone who left me at the altar? He flinched like I'd slapped him. Good. I opened the portfolio and looked down at his resume, even though I'd already memorized every word. So, Mason, you're applying for our senior account executive position. This role requires strong relationship management skills, reliability, and the ability to commit to long-term client partnerships. Do you think you have those qualities? The irony hung in the air between us, sharp as a knife. Mason, he started, then stopped. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. I don't know what to say. You could start by answering the question, I said. This is a job interview, after all. Let's keep it professional. He swallowed hard.
Yes.
I believe I have those qualities. I've spent 15 years building relationships in the commercial real estate sector. I understand the industry, the challenges these companies face, and how to communicate their value propositions effectively. And yet your resume shows 6 different positions in the last 10 years. That doesn't exactly scream stability or commitment. The market has been challenging, he said, defensive now. The real estate sector went through significant disruption. Companies downsized, projects were canceled. It wasn't always within my control. Nothing is ever completely within our control, I agreed. But how we respond to challenges, that's what defines us. Wouldn't you say? He met my eyes and I saw that he understood we weren't just talking about his career anymore. Megan, about what happened, I know I can never. There's nothing I can say that would. You're right, I interrupted. There isn't. So, let's focus on the position you're applying for. Tell me about your experience with marketing strategy for real estate technology platforms. For the next 20 minutes, I put Mason through the most thorough, most grueling job interview I'd ever conducted. I asked him technical questions about CRM systems, digital marketing analytics, content strategy, client retention metrics. I challenged every answer he gave. I made him pitch to me as if I were a skeptical client. I watched him sweat through his shirt. He wasn't bad, actually. He knew his industry, and he could articulate value propositions clearly. Under different circumstances, he might have been a decent candidate. But these weren't different circumstances. When I'd exhausted my questions, I closed the portfolio and looked at him directly. Is there anything you'd like to ask me about the position or the company? He hesitated, then said quietly, Are you actually considering me for this job, or was this just an opportunity to... To what? I asked. To humiliate you? To get revenge? I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Maybe a little of both. But mostly, I wanted to see what happened to the man who once told me he was going to build an empire. The man who was too ambitious to settle down, too focused on his career to get married. I never said that, Mason protested. That's not why I left. No. I stood up, gathering my portfolio. Then why did you leave, Mason? What was so terrifying about marrying me that you couldn't even do it in person? He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion in his face. Pain, regret, shame. I was scared, he said simply. I was 25 years old, and I was terrified that I was making a mistake. That we were too young. That we didn't really know each other. That I'd wake up at 40 and realize I'd chosen wrong. So instead, you left me standing at an altar in front of everyone I knew. You took the coward's way out. Yes, he said. I did. And I've regretted it every single day since. Good, I said. The word came out harder than I'd intended. You should regret it. Not because of what you did to me, although that was unforgivable, but because you wasted your own potential. You were so busy running away from commitment that you never committed to anything. Not to a relationship, not to a career, not even to yourself. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. You want to know the funny thing, Mason? You were right to leave me. Not because of how you did it, but because we would have been terrible together. I was trying to be someone I wasn't, someone small enough to fit in your shadow. And you weren't half the man I thought you were. So thank you, actually, for having the wisdom to leave, even if you lacked the courage to do it right. Are you going to give me the job? He asked. I considered it for a moment, really considered it. It would be the ultimate power move, wouldn't it? To hire him, to have him report to me. to prove every single day that I'd won and he'd lost. But that's not what winning looked like. "No," I said. "You're not qualified for the position. You lack the stability and commitment we require in our senior team members. But more than that, I don't hire people I don't respect. And I'm sorry, Mason, but I don't respect you." I opened the door and walked out, leaving him sitting alone in that conference room. I didn't look back. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd have my moment of confrontation and closure and move on with my life. But the universe wasn't done with its lessons yet. 2 weeks after the interview, James came into my office with a strange expression on his face. "You have a visitor," he said. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important. Her name is Vanessa Webb." I frowned. "Webb, as in?" "Mason Webb's wife," James confirmed. "Do you want me to send her away?" My first instinct was yes. I'd closed that chapter, turned that page, moved forward. But curiosity got the better of me. "No," I said. "Send her in." Vanessa Webb was not what I expected. She was tall, blonde, and polished in the way of women who'd never had to fight for anything. She wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry, but her eyes were tired, and her smile was forced. "Mrs. Matthews," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm sure this is awkward." "Ms. Matthews," I corrected, shaking her hand briefly. "I never married. And yes, it's awkward. Please sit down." She settled into the chair across from my desk, clutching a designer handbag like a life preserver. "I'm not sure where to start," she said. "Marcus told me about the interview, about what you said to him." "I'm sure he did," I said neutrally. "If you're here to defend him or ask me to reconsider, I'm afraid you've wasted your time." "No," she said quickly. "That's not why I'm here. I'm here to say thank you." That caught me off guard. "Excuse me?" "You told Mason the truth," she said. "Something no one else has had the courage to do in years, including me. You told him that he's wasted his potential, that he runs away from commitment, that he's never become the man he could have been. And he needed to hear that." She opened her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. "We've been married for 8 years, she continued. "We have 2 children. And Mason has been depressed and unfulfilled for most of that time. He jumps from job to job, always blaming external circumstances, never taking responsibility. He drinks too much. He's emotionally distant. He talks constantly about the life he should have had, the success he deserves, but he never actually does the work." I listened, not sure where this was going or why she was telling me all this. "After your interview, he came home and got drunk," Vanessa said. "Really drunk. And he told me everything. About leaving you at the altar, about how he's been running from his mistakes ever since, about how seeing you successful and powerful made him realize how badly he's failed. And then he cried. For hours. Like something had finally broken through." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "He's been in therapy ever since. Real therapy, not just going through the motions. He's working on himself, finally taking responsibility. He even apologized to his parents for blaming them for pushing him into the engagement with you. He's becoming the person he should have been all along. And it started with you telling him the truth." I sat back in my chair, processing this. "I'm glad Mason is getting help," I said carefully. "But I didn't do it for his benefit. I did it for mine." "I know," Vanessa said. "And that's why it worked. You weren't trying to fix him or save him. You just held up a mirror and made him see himself clearly. Sometimes that's the greatest gift you can give someone, even if it doesn't feel like a gift in the moment." She stood up, adjusting her handbag. "I should go. I just wanted you to know that your words had an impact. And also," she paused, meeting my eyes, "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what he did to you. I can't imagine the pain of being left like that. But I'm in awe of what you've built from that pain. You turned trauma into triumph, and that's extraordinary." After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, thinking about her words. I'd spent 10 years believing that success was the best revenge, that building an empire while Mason floundered was the ultimate victory. And in some ways it was. But Vanessa had revealed something I hadn't expected. My words had actually helped Mason begin to heal. Not because I'd forgiven him or shown him compassion, but because I'd been ruthlessly honest. And in that honesty, he'd found the motivation to change. It was an unsatisfying ending in a way. There was no dramatic confrontation where I destroyed him. No moment where he begged for forgiveness, and I coldly refused. Just two broken people who'd hurt each other, who'd both grown from that hurt in different ways, finally seeing each other clearly after 10 years. 6 months after Mason interview, I was invited to speak at a conference for women entrepreneurs in San Francisco. The theme was From Setback to Success, and the organizers wanted me to share my story. I almost said no. I'd spent years building my professional reputation on my business acumen, not my personal drama. But something made me accept. The conference was held at a hotel in Union Square. There were 300 women in the audience, ranging from 20-somethings with startup dreams to 60-somethings who'd built empires. I stood backstage, listening to my introduction, feeling nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. When I walked onto that stage, I made a decision. I was going to tell the truth. "My name is Megan Matthews," I began. 10 years ago, I was left at the altar. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I told them everything. The wedding dress, the rain, the 3 days of crying, the decision to get up and rebuild, the years of grinding work, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, the slow, steady climb to success. And finally, the interview with Mason, the confrontation I'd been building toward without even realizing it. For 10 years, I told myself I was building a successful company. I said. And I was. But I was also building armor. I was proving that I didn't need anyone, that I could be complete all by myself. I made my company my entire identity because I was terrified of ever being vulnerable again. I paused, looking out at the audience. 300 faces looking back at me, some nodding, some crying, all listening. And then my ex-fiancé walked into my office applying for a job, and I realized something. He hadn't ruined my life by leaving me. He'd saved me from a life where I'd never have become myself, where I'd have been content to be small, to be secondary, to be safe. His betrayal forced me to discover my own strength. His absence created the space for me to become someone I actually liked being. I took a breath, feeling emotion rise in my throat. But here's the thing I've learned. Revenge is overrated. Success is incredible, don't get me wrong. Building something from nothing is deeply satisfying. But if you're only building it to prove something to someone who hurt you, you're still letting them define you. You're still giving them power. The real victory isn't when the person who hurt you sees what they lost. It's when you stop needing them to see it. It's when you're so focused on where you're going that you forget to look back at where you've been. It's when success stops being about revenge and starts being about purpose. I finished my speech to a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of women approached me with their own stories of betrayal and transformation. Some had been left at altars too. Others had been fired, divorced, cheated on, passed over for promotions. But all of them had taken their pain and turned it into fuel. And I realized that was the real story. Not me versus Mason. Not the wronged woman who got her revenge, but the universal human experience of being broken and choosing to rebuild yourself into something stronger. Here's what I haven't told you yet, the part that complicates the narrative of triumphant revenge. I did hire Mason, not for the senior account executive position, but for a lower-level role on a 6-month contract. I did it 3 months after the interview, after thinking long and hard about what I actually wanted. I didn't hire him to torture him or humiliate him. I hired him because after our conversation and after meeting Vanessa, I'd done some research. I'd looked into the therapy practice Mason was attending. I'd tracked his sobriety through mutual acquaintances. I'd verified that he was actually doing the work to change. And I'd realized something uncomfortable. I'd been carrying around the story of Mason the villain for 10 years. It had motivated me, fueled me, justified every sacrifice I'd made. But it wasn't entirely true.
And if you love real life stories with tough choices, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.